My wife says our marriage is ruined over a Disney trip with my daughter. Is she overreacting? Hey Reddit. When I married my wife 3 years ago, I truly believed we had built something strong. I have a daughter from a previous marriage, and while co-parenting with my ex-wife has its challenges, we've managed to make it work for the sake of our child. My daughter, who is 10, is my world, and I've always made sure she knows she comes first. My current wife was aware of this from the beginning, and I thought she understood what it meant to be with someone who had a child from a previous relationship. But everything came crashing down because of a trip to Disney. For context, my daughter had been asking to go to Disney World for years. It was something we had talked about endlessly, and I had promised her that one day, when I could afford to make it truly special, I would take her. This year, I finally made that happen. I saved up, planned the entire trip, and was beyond excited to surprise her. She was over the moon when I told her, and I felt like I had just won the Best Dad Ever award in her eyes. Here's where the problem starts: my wife wasn't invited. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let me explain. This trip was meant to be a special father-daughter bonding experience. My daughter and I have a very close relationship, but with the challenges of co-parenting and shared custody, I don't always get as much one-on-one time with her as I would like. When I brought up the idea of taking my daughter to Disney, my wife was initially supportive. She even helped me pick out hotels and look at different park attractions. But as the trip got closer, she started making comments about how it would have been nice if she could come along too. At first, I thought she was just expressing a passing thought, but then it became a serious discussion. She started saying things like, "I don't see why I shouldn't be included in a family trip," and, "It feels like you're drawing a line between your daughter and me." That wasn't my intention at all. I tried to explain that this was something I had planned with my daughter long before we even got married, and that it was important for us to have this experience just the two of us. My wife wasn't convinced. She argued that we were a family now and that excluding her made it feel like she wasn't part of that family. She brought up how she had been putting in effort to bond with my daughter, and this trip felt like a step backward. She even asked if I had invited my ex-wife, which I found absurd. Of course, I hadn't. This was strictly a father-daughter trip. Despite the tension, I went ahead with the trip. My daughter and I had an amazing time. We met her favorite characters, rode all the rides she had dreamed of, and created memories I know she'll cherish forever. I was thrilled to have given her that experience, but when I got home, my wife was ice cold. She barely spoke to me, avoided eye contact, and when I finally got her to sit down and talk, she told me that I had tarnished our marriage. She said she felt like I had drawn a line in the sand and made it clear that she and my daughter would never truly be part of the same family. She accused me of prioritizing my past over our present and said she felt humiliated that she had to stay home while I went on what she called a family vacation without her. I was completely taken aback. I tried to tell her that this wasn't about excluding her, but rather about fulfilling a promise I had made to my daughter long before she and I had even met. I reminded her that she knew from the start how important my daughter was to me and that I would always make her my top priority. But nothing I said seemed to matter. She said that marriage means blending lives, not keeping things separate, and that I had effectively pushed her out of a part of my world. Since then, things have only gotten worse. She's distant, cold, and has even started sleeping in the guest room. Every time I try to bring it up, she either shuts down or says she's still processing how deeply I hurt her. I don't know what to do. I love my wife, but I also refuse to feel guilty for putting my daughter first. Was I really wrong to take my daughter on this trip alone? Is my wife overreacting, or am I failing to see how much I've hurt her? The part that really confuses me is how sudden this change was. Before this, my wife had never expressed any resentment towards my daughter or our dynamic. In fact, she had always claimed to respect the bond I had with her. She would talk about how she understood that being a stepmother meant supporting that relationship, not interfering with it. So why is this suddenly an issue? It's like she flipped a switch the moment she realized she wasn't invited. I've gone on plenty of father-daughter outings before, and she never reacted this way. Why is a Disney trip the breaking point? Another thing that's been bothering me is that my wife hasn't even attempted to talk to my daughter since we got back. Normally, she asks her about her day, checks in on her homework, and even tries to get her to watch movies together. But now, she's completely withdrawn. It's like she's holding a grudge against a 10-year-old, which is making me feel even more uneasy about the whole situation. If she's this upset with me, fine. But why is she suddenly acting like my daughter doesn't exist? I've also noticed her behavior shifting in other ways. She's been on her phone constantly, texting someone late into the night. She never used to do that. And when I casually asked her who she was talking to, she got defensive and said, "Just a friend." Maybe I'm overthinking things, but considering how angry she is with me, I can't help but feel like something else is going on. Is she venting to someone about me? Or worse, is she looking for comfort elsewhere? Then, last night, She dropped a bombshell. She told me that she's been thinking a lot about our marriage and that she's questioning whether we're truly compatible. She said she's not sure if she can handle always coming second in my life. That hurt more than anything.
I never saw my wife as coming second, I just see my daughter as my responsibility, my flesh and blood.
It's not a competition. But hearing her say that made me wonder if she's been feeling this way for a long time and just never voiced it until now. And now, I just found out something that might change everything. Update: I wasn't sure what to expect after my last post, but things have only gotten worse. My wife's cold behavior hasn't changed, and the distance between us is becoming unbearable. Every attempt I make to talk things through is met with either silence or short, clipped responses. She's clearly still angry, but what's more unsettling is how indifferent she seems. It's like she's already checked out of the marriage. She doesn't ask me about my day, barely acknowledges my presence, and goes to bed before I even have the chance to say goodnight. What makes it even more frustrating is that she still refuses to talk to my daughter. My little girl has noticed it too. She asked me why my wife seems mad at her and whether she did something wrong. That absolutely broke my heart. I reassured her that none of this was her fault, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. She adores my wife and had been building a bond with her, but now, that relationship seems to be unraveling before my eyes. And for what? Because I took my daughter on a trip that I had promised her years ago? I decided to confront my wife again, hoping that time would have softened her stance. I sat her down and told her that I needed to understand where she was coming from, that this silent treatment was not sustainable, and that ignoring my daughter was crossing a line. She finally admitted that she resents the fact that I made such a big effort for my daughter while she has never received the same level of attention from me. She said she felt like a guest in her own marriage, like she was an outsider looking in. She admitted that it wasn't just about the trip, this was just the final straw in a long list of moments where she felt like she wasn't as important as my past. I was stunned. I had never seen our marriage that way. I thought I was balancing everything as best as I could, making sure my daughter felt secure while also making my wife feel loved. But she sees it completely differently. She sees herself as an afterthought. She even admitted that she's been questioning whether she made a mistake marrying someone with a child from a previous relationship, and that maybe she underestimated how hard it would be. That felt like a slap in the face. I reminded her that she walked into this marriage fully aware that my daughter was my priority, that I never hid that from her. I asked her why she waited until now to say something instead of bringing it up earlier when we could have worked through it together. She just shrugged and said she didn't realize how much it would hurt until it became unbearable. Then she dropped another bombshell: she thinks we should take a break. She wants to spend some time apart to figure out whether she can continue being in this marriage. She says she loves me, but she's not sure if she can handle feeling like she'll always come second. I don't know what to do. I never wanted things to come to this, and I never imagined that something as simple as a trip with my daughter could push my marriage to the edge. Another update: I agreed to give her space, even though it felt like a slow-motion car crash happening right in front of me. She packed a bag and left to stay with a friend for a few days, saying she needed clarity. The house has been eerily quiet since she left. My daughter noticed immediately, asking why my wife wasn't home. I had to come up with some excuse to avoid making her worry, but I know she senses that something is wrong. While my wife has been gone, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe she's right, maybe I haven't done enough to make her feel like she's a true part of this family. I started reflecting on our marriage, trying to see things from her perspective. I realized that while I've always been a devoted father, I might not have put the same level of effort into being a devoted husband. It's not that I don't love my wife, I do, but maybe I've been so focused on my daughter that I didn't see how much my wife was struggling to feel included. At the same time, I can't ignore the red flags. She didn't just express her feelings, she completely shut me out and treated my daughter like she was to blame. That's not something I can easily forget. Marriage is supposed to be about communication, and instead of talking to me earlier, she let resentment fester until it exploded into this. What worries me the most is that even if I try to fix things, is she truly willing to embrace the fact that my daughter will always be a core part of my life? Or will this issue resurface over and over again? Then something happened that completely changed my perspective. A friend of mine, who knows about the situation, sent me a screenshot of my wife's social media. It was a post she had made that read, "Sometimes, you have to put yourself first and walk away from situations that don't serve you anymore." That sent a chill down my spine. It didn't sound like someone who was trying to fix a marriage, it sounded like someone who was preparing to leave. I decided to dig a little deeper, and I found out that she has been confiding in a male coworker about our marital problems. I don't know if there's anything going on between them, but the fact that she's leaning on another man while shutting me out is enough to make me question everything. If she was truly committed to making this work, wouldn't she be talking to me instead? I confronted her about it when she came home to grab more clothes. She didn't deny it. She said he was just a friend and that she needed someone to talk to. But when I asked why she couldn't talk to me, she just shook her head and said, "Because you'll never understand." At that moment, I realized that no matter how much I love her, I can't force her to see our marriage the way I do. Final update. It's over. She officially told me that she wants a divorce. She sat me down and said that she's been thinking about this for a long time, that the Disney trip was just the tipping point, not the root cause. She said she doesn't want to spend her life feeling like she's fighting for second place. She doesn't want to compete with my daughter for attention, and she doesn't believe I'll ever change the way I prioritize my time. She made it clear that she still loves me, but love isn't enough. She wants a life where she's the main priority, and she doesn't think she can ever have that with me. I told her that I would never neglect my daughter for anyone, and if that was the issue, then maybe she was right, maybe we weren't meant to be together. The hardest part was watching her pack up her things and leave for good. She didn't even say goodbye to my daughter. That told me everything I needed to know. Looking back, I think this was inevitable. My daughter will always come first, and I need to be with someone who understands and accepts that. Maybe my wife did love me, but she never fully accepted the fact that my daughter isn't just a part of my life, she is my life. As painful as this is, I know I made the right decision. My daughter deserves a home where she doesn't feel like a burden, and I deserve a partner who truly supports me as a father. So, here we are. Just me and my daughter, moving forward. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.